Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Kingdom Hearts review series. After the success of the first Kingdom Hearts game, in addition to that cliffhanger ending and the various post-credit teaser videos, it was pretty much a sure thing that the series was going to continue in some form. Now, development had started on the sequel, Kingdom Hearts 2, during 2003, and by a year after the American release of the first game, screenshots were already being shown off in gaming magazines. Seriously, I still remember the first month of 7th grade, one of my friends brought in, I can't remember what magazine it was, but there it was, pictures of Kingdom Hearts 2, and it was so cool. Again, you gotta remember, the internet was still in its infancy. I mean, websites existed to that degree, but, you had to find these things, and it wasn't that easy to always, look up games and stuff. Nowadays, you can't, go 2 steps without figuring out where a game is and finding a website that covers it, but back in those days, magazines was it, and I just thought it was amazing to see this new footage of a game I just beat from a few months ago. And suddenly there it was, all these cool screenshots. Who's that character? Who's this character? I'll put up on screen some of the pictures I vaguely remember being in there. Again, I don't remember the magazine, but I definitely remember it happening. However, the next game that the fans got was not the numbered title, and was the first of many bridge spin-off games leading into future installments. Now, some might classify this type of game as a spin-off, but I think spin-off counts more towards games whose plots don't tie back into the main plot line in any meaningful way. Let's see, how can I talk about this? Mario Kart is a spin-off to the Mario franchise. It's got nothing to do with the main games kind of a thing. Or the Dissidia games for Final Fantasy. They don't have anything to do with the main Final Fantasy games. They're just some spin-off thing that you couldn't play if you want, but is not necessarily needed to understand anything. Pretty much all of the Kingdom Hearts games from this point out will tie in or have some impact on the plot going forward. So in place of Kingdom Hearts 2, what was announced was Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. And it was announced for the Game Boy Advance of all systems. This also started the series' confusing and at times frustrating jumps to different systems. It used to be the main reason why some people refused to even get into the series at all, due to the various different systems one would have to own in order to play each game. However, in our very modern world of 2023, all but 2 of the games are now playable on modern consoles, and those 2 that are not playable were reworked into only including the cutscenes. So unless you're from the year 2005, I don't think it's a valid reason to not try the series, because your excuse is that it's on too many different systems. Yes, people used that excuse a lot back in the day, and some still do, despite the ease of getting into the series in more recent times. Now, we're actually not going to be looking at the GBA original, because Square was nice enough to remake the game on PS2 in 2007. It was originally included as the second disc in the Japan-only Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, and it made me cry internally because I thought it was so unfair. I still remember going on, I think it was Kingdom Hearts Vids or KH Insider, I can't remember which Kingdom Hearts websites I used to follow back in the day, but basically they announced Final Mix 2, and I was like, okay, they're getting another director's cut of their second game, fine, whatever, and then they're like, wait a minute, there's going to be another disc, and what's on the other disc? This remake of Chain of Memories, and it looked so cool, and I was like, why can't we play that? It seemed so unfair. Eventually, it hit the United States 1 year later, though, and Europe was shafted until 2013 before they ended up getting it as part of the 1.5 Remix Collection HD edition. The remake obviously brings the game into 3D and contains voiced cutscenes for the scenes that take place outside of the Disney worlds. The only new additions to the game were the mini-games and an added boss fight. Now, when Chain of Memories was announced, I actually didn't run out to get it. In fact, I almost didn't pick it up until 6 months after it was released. And that's because young Chris was kind of an idiot and was kind of convinced that the game was just merely a handheld version of the PS2 game that I played to death. I mean, this was actually a common practice back in the day. Console games would, sometimes get a handheld version handled by a different development team, so the gameplay would be a little different, but the plot would be similar. You got your movie-based games that did that. Let me try to think. Your one-off sports games did that. It wasn't uncommon for, a game to exist on 2 different systems to, give it more, profitability, reach a different crowd, take it on the go. So after seeing screenshots of the Disney world looking very similar to how events had played out in the original, I thought, okay, I can skip this because I've played this before. Only to later learn by reading the game's script summary on Game FAQs that it introduced new characters and pushed the stories closer to the plot of Kingdom Hearts 2. I ended up getting the game as a graduation present then in 2005, and I actually played it on my DS, which was a godsend with the backlight. So while we'll be looking at the PS2 remake, it's important to keep in mind that the design of this game is still that of a handheld title, so making huge comparisons to the first game would be totally unfair. I'll mention those differences, but I'm not going to let that impact the score. So here we go with another long story summary, though honestly I think this one will be a lot shorter from the last video. So the game picks up from the first post-credits scene ending in which Sora, Donald, and Goofy were chasing Pluto in the field. After resting for a bit one night, Sora awakens and finds a mysterious man in a black coat beckoning him down another path. Also, I've heard rumors that Pluto wasn't really there, it's a dream, he hadn't really been chasing him. I always just thought that Sora and his team were running after him, got tired, slept in the field, and then woke up, but whatever. Who knows, maybe a game in the future will explain that. The trio head after this man and arrive at Castle Oblivion. Upon entering the castle, the group learns that the mysterious man works for a group called the Organization, and that Sora has people waiting for him deeper inside the castle, people from his past. Unfortunately, entering the castle has caused the party to lose all of their abilities from the last game, and as the man goes on to explain, progressing further into the castle will cause their memories to be erased in exchange for discovering their true memories. Progressing through the castle's 13 floors will take you back to each world from the first game, with the exception of Deep Jungle, thanks in part to that Disney lawsuit with them losing the rights between games. Each Disney world plays out similar to what happened in the first game, albeit with a slight twist. For instance, in Alice in Wonderland, the Queen believes that Alice tampered with her memory this time, not her heart. Or how in Halloween Town, Jack is now trying to create an experiment to discover true memories rather than create a heart on its own. After clearing the first floor, Sora battles Axel, who gives him more cards to visit more worlds from his memories. Turns out, though, while we're off on our Disney adventures inside the castle, members of the organization, led by the mysterious man who first beckoned us here, who's called Marluxia, are trying to lure Sora into some kind of trap. Axel works for Marluxia, as does a woman named Larxene. They also are aided by the organization's scientist, a man named Vexen. As Sora moves up each floor, he slowly begins to remember a girl from the Destiny Islands who was friends with him and Riku. He remembers promising to protect her, and even has her good luck charm. Now, this all sounds a tad sketchy, especially when you start realizing that Sora stops mentioning, his other girlfriend that he left back home. At the halfway point, Sora battles Larxene, who reveals to Sora that the girl he's been remembering since he entered the castle is called Naminé, and she's one of the organization's prisoners. Sora makes it his mission to save his recently rediscovered friend. However, upon tackling the second set of floors, Vexen unleashes Riku onto the party. Riku seems to be on the same mission of protecting Naminé, and even seems to have the same memories as Sora in regards to promising Naminé that he would protect her. And he also has her good luck charm as well. Vexen makes things more complicated as he gives Sora a special card to access a world from the memories on the other side of his heart, which obviously confuses Sora and the player because this was a plot thread that wouldn't get addressed until Kingdom Hearts 2. This leads the party into Twilight Town, and the group tries to figure out how Sora is connected to this place, but they come up with no answers. And just when it seems like Vexen will spill the beans on the connection, Axel arrives and kills him on orders from Marluxia to eliminate the traitors in the organization. After clashing with Riku across several floors, Sora becomes obsessed with finding Naminé, even though Donald and Goofy become much more suspicious about the whole situation.
I don't understand what's going on.
Let's just keep moving, okay? It doesn't matter.
That's pretty bad that Donald and Goofy are figuring this stuff out before Sora. At this point, Axel starts showing signs of betrayal as he lets Naminé go to find Sora. Sora then runs off to find Naminé in a copy of the Destiny Islands before he's confronted by another version of Naminé, who claims that the girl he's been talking to during his time in Destiny Islands and the girl that he's remembering is nothing but a fabrication, and that Naminé had been rewriting Sora's memories bit by bit as he made it through the castle. Riku then arrives, hell-bent on fighting Sora, still wanting to protect Naminé, when she goes off and does this.
I said stop!
Riku? Riku? Riku!
Okay, relax. It's not the real Riku. As Larxene arrives, she reveals that it turns out the real Riku has never even been here, and this version is merely a replica puppet created by Vexen. Larxene also reveals that Marluxia's plan involved having Naminé erase Sora's memory and then rewrite it to their own design so that they could turn Sora into their puppet by rewriting his memories. And honestly, they almost succeeded too. Sora and Larxene battle, finally putting her out of commission. The Riku replica awakens and agrees to help Sora out, as the only memories he has is of Naminé, so he might as well honor them. Sora comes to a similar outlook as he doesn't blame Naminé for messing with his memories and decides that he might as well still help her out. The group then makes it to the end of the 13th floor where Axel and Marluxia are squaring up, because apparently Marluxia's whole plot hasn't been approved by the leader of the organization, and it turns out Axel's really been sent here to eliminate Marluxia's splinter faction. Marluxia uses Sora to fend off Axel while he goes further into the castle, and Axel fades away seemingly defeated. At long last, we reach Marluxia at the top and engage in the final battle. With Marluxia defeated, Sora and the gang have a choice to make. They can leave the castle with their newly formed memories that Naminé tweaked, or Naminé can basically factory reset pin their memories before they entered the castle, making it as though the game never really happened, but kinda happened, but technically Sora won't remember it, which theoretically would explain why players who hadn't played this game and jumped to Kingdom Hearts 2 wouldn't be that confused, but still would be confused because the game's still addressed. Okay, it's very confusing. Basically, she can erase his memories, which I'll explain more about why that would have made sense when we get to Kingdom Hearts 2's plot development. Sora chooses to get his old memories back, but also promises to never forget Naminé, and to one day thank her for helping him. They also let Jiminy write it in his journal to thank Naminé, why he doesn't just write what happened in the entire castle and go, please don't forget this! I don't know, it's a vague thing, but you'll see how that plans out in the next game. Naminé then puts the gang into sleep pods as she begins to restore their memories. There ends the story of Chain of Memories. Or is it? Nope. After getting through the credits, you return to the main menu to see a new mode called Reverse Rebirth, which sounds disgusting. You now get to play as Riku, basically. The real Riku, not the puppet Riku from Sora's playthrough. See, it turns out the real Riku was in the castle the whole time. He just landed in the basement section several hours before Sora. Riku starts his journey alone and is continuously taunted by the lingering spirit of the darkness still inside of him that takes on the form of Ansem. It's not the real Ansem, it's just like his hallucination, so don't get too confused there. As he makes his way back to the ground level, he too encounters Vexen, who copies his memories, which explains how the puppet Riku remembered everything about his past. Riku also deals with two new members of the organization that Sora didn't encounter, Lexaeus and Zexion. The two wish to counter Marluxia's plan to make Sora their puppet by having Riku be their puppet instead. However, Riku dispatches Lexaeus shortly after meeting him and then takes care of Zexion after he attempts to engulf Riku in light to destroy him way after Sora has taken out Marluxia. Thankfully, Riku is saved by Naminé pretending to be Kairi. Naminé also offers to help Riku control his darkness while he attempts to reach the first floor. Before doing so, Riku meets a mysterious man named Diz, who sends Riku to find Naminé in the castle before he leaves. But before we can do that, the Riku replica appears, and having been led on by Axel during the post-credit scenes of Sora's adventure, decides he no longer wants to be a fake and plans to destroy the real Riku to prove his superiority. Naturally, our real boy Riku pulls through and the replica fades away, seemingly. Before leaving the castle proper, Riku chooses to face the lingering spirit of Ansem in a final showdown. Riku succeeds and learns of the fate that befell Sora, Donald, and Goofy, and meets up with King Mickey, ready to work alongside Diz and Naminé to protect Sora until he's ready to wake up, or whenever the hell Square is ready to release that sequel. After these credits pass, we see a silent shot of the remaining members of the organization, setting the stage for Kingdom Hearts 2. So how does that plot compare to the first game? Well, the simplicity of the first game has started to fade out now, hasn't it? There are way more characters, each with their own agendas, and because this game's an interquel, there's a bunch of questions here that get raised that don't necessarily get the answers we want right away. The lore really started to be expanded here. Not all of Chain of Memories is going to make sense on the first playthrough, or even the second. This is clearly a game that is part 1 of sorts, with Kingdom Hearts 2 answering most of the questions that were raised here. Still, I really like this game's story because essentially it plays around with another aspect of the human heart, this time memory. Like, how do we choose to hold on to what we remember? Why do we sometimes suddenly remember things long past? Well, I don't think the game ever gets too heavy-handed with the theme. It's a nice change-up from the last game. Also, it's nice to have human villains as opposed to just Ansem, who spent most of the last game off screen, and the Heartless, which are more abstract villains. The organization are people with motives and agendas and their own personalities, even if they have no hearts in that regard. Some of them shine a lot more than others, though honestly the ones that don't do a lot here would end up getting more screen time in later installments, but that's hitting way heavy spoilers. I love Axel and his cocky attitude and how he plays both sides of the castle and their plots to interfere with our heroes. Is he good? Is he bad? Who's he really looking out for? You honestly don't know, but you want to find out. Larxene is spiteful and cruel, and you generally want to smack her around with the Keyblade when she starts toying around with Sora. Vexen is elitist and vain, and honestly, you're not really sure what he's planning, or if it's all just an experimenting game to him. I honestly get some Professor Hojo from Final Fantasy VII vibes from him. Not sure if that's intentional, but it would make sense. Tetsuya Nomura designed him as well. Lexaeus and Zexion are probably the ones that don't shine as bright here, because honestly, they have like 10 minutes of screen time, though thankfully the later games will shine a better light on them, but again, spoilers. As for our new villain, Marluxia, well, honestly, while I was playing the GBA original, I thought he was a female. I mean, look at him! I mean, there's an A at the end of the name, which, you know, in some languages is a feminine thing, so boom, I thought girl. The hair, the facial features, and, you know, the pink scythe. I mean, come on. I mean, I guess anybody could use a pink anything, but, like, come on. Alright, all joking aside, he's a bit more interesting since his plan is pretty smart, and he would have succeeded had Axel not been there to interfere. I mean, most villains try to kill the protagonist, but here the villains were, like, subtly trying to enslave the protagonist, which I gotta give him points there. I like Naminé's introduction here as well. She's another great Kingdom Hearts original character, and you kind of feel bad for her. It's not like she wanted to help the organization, she was forced to. Though I particularly once again love Riku's story because it smartly chooses to address the character's turn to the dark side in the last game, rather than just sweep it under the rug. Nope, this was the first game and the second part of Riku's story attempting to show the character's redemption arc. Riku spends most of his floors wondering if he really can get rid of the darkness he let in or if he's fated to be controlled by it. It leads to a very solid path for the character to take, as by the end he hasn't removed the darkness but chosen to embrace it and control it in balance with the light. And I like this because the series has already illustrated that the goal of the series isn't to eliminate the darkness, but rather it's one side of the same coin as light. The gameplay of Chain of Memories, however, is a huge departure from the last game. As the franchise would go on, the core battle system would experience changes, though this game probably has the most drastic ones compared to the rest. The general design is that you explore the Disney worlds and fight the Heartless, but the way you fight and even explore the worlds are a far cry from the PS2 original. The battle system has now been replaced with the card system, in which now to perform any actions requires a card. Cards carry a number from 0 to 9, which tells you how strong they are, so there isn't a strength stat anymore to build up. However, certain attack cards can be graded on an S to D scale, indicating how powerful they will be. You can still mash X to attack, but if you run out of cards, you're done. And the same goes for spells and abilities. If you don't have the correct cards in your deck, you're not going to be doing anything. All magic is done using the card, so there's no MP also. You need a cure card if you want to heal, and if you want to perform the higher levels of any spell, you'll need multiples of the same card. The abilities such as Sonic Blade and Blitz are now performed by stocking up 3 cards and performing what's called a sleight. There's usually a certain requirement of cards to perform the move, such as making sure each card is different, or that they all add up to a certain number. There are friend cards to use as well, and this summons allies, but these are not placed into your deck, but rather picked up during the battles. This allows you to fight side along Donald, Goofy, and the various Disney characters. Also adding to the complexity is the Zero card, which breaks any and all cards thrown down by the enemy. However, it's a double-edged sword in that if you throw it down too fast, the enemy might break it back on you. I should also bring up the stocking mechanic here, since that too is a double-edged sword as well. See, the first card you stock will be automatically removed from your deck somewhat permanently for the rest of the fight. So it's very easy to lose your level 9 attack cards, and even your cure cards if you're not careful with what you accidentally placed first. I say somewhat permanent here since Chain of Memories allows you to find the Pluto card on the battlefield, and he can bring back these lost cards. Providing the boss card doesn't zero card Pluto and send him away. There are also enemy cards that you can use to perform different effects, such as adding a point to each of your cards to make them stronger, or randomly healing you without the need for any cure cards. When you use all your cards, you'll have to reload them by standing still and holding the X over the reload button, but each time you do, it's going to take longer to bring the cards back. Though you can use item cards to get some or even all of the cards back should you have access to those items as well. Summons return, and as you guessed it, as cards that you have to place in your deck. And much like accessing the higher magic abilities, you'll have to stock multiples of the same summon card in order to get access to the better moves. The summons are mostly from the first game, with Mushu, Bambi, Dumbo, Simba, Genie, and Tinkerbell returning. The one new summon card we get is Cloud, which makes me kind of wish the series had leaned more into this summoning of famous Final Fantasy characters, because this is the only game where this kind of thing happens. Now this system has its pros and cons. The pros are that it's a bit more strategic than the random button mashing of the last game, though that's only really during the boss fights. With the standard enemies, you can just mash cards, but for the bosses, it's definitely worth it to use those zero cards to break their sleights, which can cause you to avoid a ton of damage. Also, during boss fights, you'll get access to a green Mickey card, which can appear, and this will usually give you a perk in the battle, such as getting a free few hits on the boss, though it only appears on the Disney bosses and not with the organization fights. And now the cons, since literally this system has a ton of flaws. The biggest con is the way in which you obtain new cards is mostly random. I say mostly since aside from the select cards given out as part of rewards for beating bosses, you have no control over what you get. You get these random cards by hitting objects in the environment or buying card packs from Moogles, which grant random packs of cards. See, it's a loot box before loot boxes infected every damn corner of the gaming landscape. Seriously, imagine if this game was made by, EA or Activision now. You need, 3 types of currencies just to buy the right cards you need. Sounds like a mobile game, doesn't it? Anyway, tangent avoided. The random drops can be anything, such as more attack cards or magic cards. So, sure, you might have one cure card that the game gave you as part of the story, but if you want to use Cura or Curaga, you're going to need more, and there isn't really a definite way to ensure that you will. The card packs tend to be pretty decent on giving you what you want, though the strength of the card might not be that great, so once again you're dealing with randomness. And hey, I didn't mention the best part. Getting to the Moogle shop itself is random, because it's based on if you have a card to summon the room, and I'll explain more about that when we talk about the exploration aspect to the game. More randomness is what your friend's card will do when they're summoned. For the most part, they're alright, and they'll usually take care of an enemy or two before they fade out. And if you stock multiple friend cards of the same one, the attack will be stronger and last longer. However, once again, Donald becomes the bane of my anger. When he's summoned, he'll perform random magic spells that you have absolutely no control over. And while you might think that when Sora is close to knocking out and the alarm bells are going off that he's going to die, the game might push his random algorithm logic into letting him cast Cure on you, well, you're sadly mistaken. I mean, sometimes he will, and sometimes he won't. Hell, sometimes he'll cast Thunder or Fire. Hell, he'll even cast Fire, Blizzard on Thunder on enemies that are healed by it. Seriously, do not summon that duck during fights against Axel, Larxene, and Vexen, because you will undo so much of the damage you just gave them. Now, I've mentioned that there's no strength stat or MP, so you might be wondering what the hell happens when you level up. Well, unlike the randomness of the last game swapping between health, strength, defense, and ability upgrades, this is the one area of the game where they turn off the randomness and let you choose what you want. You're given the choice of raising Sora's health, his card power, or learning a new sleight. You can always choose between the health and the card power upgrades, but the sleight might not always be available until you hit certain levels. I mean, they gotta get the more powerful ones somehow, although honestly, with the lack of control over what cards you can get in your deck, you most likely won't even be able to pull off some of the more advanced ones straight away. The card power upgrades allow you to place more cards in the deck because each card has a set CP. The more powerful the card is, the more CP it costs. If you're trying to rely on a deck with a bunch of attack cards, magic cards, and item cards, and even using some of those enemies and summon cards, you're going to be using a ton of CP. So upgrading health over CP isn't really a priority. In fact, if you manage to get a 0 card at any point during the early hours and you manage to use it efficiently in battle, Sora will never get hit, removing the need for the health upgrades. Also, CP essentially is what functions as the strength up ability, since gaining more CP will let you put more stronger attack cards into the deck. Otherwise, you'll be stuck with the few standard normal cards that Sora starts with, and the bosses will take forever to defeat. Though honestly, the CP upgrades could have been a bit more, because I'll usually equip about 20 to 30 attack cards, 2 cure cards, and maybe an item card or 2. And even while upgrading in the early hours, it can be a struggle to add anything else to the deck. But what hurts even more is that even with a powerful deck and strong cards, battles can still drag on longer than they need to, particularly in the opening hours. As during that time, you'll probably have cards that are like levels 5 to 8, and enemies can break those cards with their own 0 cards or higher cards, and so some of your moves will be cancelled outright. So out of the 20 attack cards I have on hand, maybe 12 will get through. Essentially, you're meant to play the game slower than you did in the last game, because each attack can be potentially deflected. The trouble is, particularly coming off the last game, is that you might be used to just mashing into enemies and hacking away at their health, and now you have to be a tad more concerned about speeding into fights, or they're going to last way longer than they need to be. This combat system is fine, but I would have liked it to be just real-time combat again, honestly. I know a ton of people who quit this game on the GBA because it was hard enough, and at times it can be a little unfair. For example, losing a boss fight isn't as easy now as just going back and adding equipment or leveling up to get stronger, since there's no equipment to put on and no levels to level up. And leveling up just lets you add maybe a card or 2 to your deck, and the cards you add might not be all that great unless you had luck at the Moogle shop or hitting something in the environment that gave you a good card. Though there is a way to play dirty and cheat the game, essentially using its own rules back against it. Basically, what you have to do is spend the first 4 hours of the game battling every Heartless on the first couple of floors. And I mean all of them, and always upgrade CP. Once you do that, you can start learning a sleight or 2, or hell, learn one once in a while as you upgrade the CP. Once you learn Sonic Blade, stop. Now recreate your deck in order to ensure that each time you stock up 3 cards, you'll unleash Sonic Blade, based on those requirements. You might need to visit the Moogle shop to get some of the cards you need, but one trip should be enough to provide you with the right luck. At this point in my playthroughs, I spam this like crazy on bosses, and they go down in a couple of hits. It's honestly the easiest way I've dealt with the battle system after all these years. It's a bit cheap, but honestly, so much is placing the battle system and leveling system on quite literally the luck of the cards, as it were. I'm playing an RPG, not a slot machine, but honestly, sometimes it feels like it is. In regards to Riku, it's pretty much the same minus all the random stuff. First off, you can't edit Riku's deck. The game automatically gives you cards that you need, and he just uses attack cards. No magic, no summons, no nothing. And since Riku doesn't have to worry about CP, he gets access to all of those enemy cards that you can obtain. Honestly, this is a godsend. Is trying to do the same thing with Riku that I just finished doing with Sora for the last 10 hours, well, that might have broken me. Riku has sleights too, but they're already learned, and you just need the cards to perform them, which sort of is up to the game when it decides to give you the higher level cards. Riku's level up screen lets you upgrade his health, his AP, or darkness points. You see, as Riku, you'll get access to all those cool moves he used against you in the first game, even that crazy finisher from the fight in Hollow Bastion called Dark Aura. The AP and DP points allow Riku to stay in his darkness form longer in order to rack up more damage. And I really like playing as Riku since there's a lot less of a headache dealing with building a deck like I did with Sora. You can't buy cards or find cards with him, you just literally get them, and I like that better here. I also like that he gets all the enemy cards since I never had the CP to place them in my deck with Sora, so I never got to try any of them out. Also, Riku doesn't have to do that reload thing, he just clicks the reload button once. The biggest flaw in Riku's design, though, is the healing ability. Like I said, Riku doesn't get any magic cards or items. He can only heal through his one friend card, King Mickey, and much like Donald, there's a randomness to casting it. If Riku's in his dark mode, then using Mickey's card will only perform a special team-up move that doesn't heal you. It sucks because a ton of the fights I could have won in one go if I had the basic healing mechanics, but instead it's left up to chance that I have a Mickey card and I'm not currently in dark mode. In regards to exploration, well, that's changed too, but mostly due to the fact that this was a GBA game originally. If you think you'd be running around the same areas from each Disney film from the first, better think again. This time, each Disney world has been broken up into smaller rooms which are essentially an extension of Castle Oblivion. Each world consists of several rooms with the goal being to hit 2 story-centric rooms before tackling the boss. Each room looks similar in style to the world it's based on, so you see the hedge mages from Wonderland, sections of the lobby from Olympus Coliseum, and so forth. However, each room is randomly generated because you choose what the room will look like. Sora must use map cards obtained from fighting the Heartless to open the doors within a world, and each card has its own criteria that'll affect the room. You can create rooms with enemies that use weaker or stronger cards, rooms where friend cards will drop more frequently, or where you can summon the Moogle shop. You need the correct cards to do so. However, you can't just use whatever cards you want whenever you want. You gotta follow the requirements on the door. Normal requirements just have you placing any type of card as long as the number on each is equal or higher than what's asked. However, boss rooms in the later areas of the game force you to use certain colored cards, certain cards with specific values, and that's where it can get a little aggravating and you might get screwed over and stuck. If you don't fight a ton of Heartless over and over again, you're cheating yourself out of the map cards. True, you can only hold 99 of them, but that'll last you for quite some time. The thing is, the combat system gets so boring and repetitive thanks to how exploration is handled. You see, unlike the last game where the Disney worlds were fun to explore because, there were Trinity markers to find, chests, shortcuts to take, Chain of Memories doesn't have any of that. Each room has enemies to fight, and that's it. There's no treasures to find because, oh, that's right, you need a card in order to open up a room that has one of those. And so, like, after floor 5, you get bored of constantly fighting, and you just want to run past. And this will hurt you in the back half of the game because you won't have enough cards, and then you get stuck. Thankfully, Recom has a way to fix this in the form of the random Joker card, which can be used for any and all criteria. However, it's a random drop just like everything else, so good luck grabbing more than one. If you get it, I suggest you save it for later. Now let's talk about the side quests, because this will be a crazy short section compared to the last game. There's no shops to make new items like the Synthesis Shop, no gummy ship, no secret bosses. There are mini games, and thankfully this time they are actually games. The one floor that isn't constantly fighting is the 100 Acre Wood, and this area is loads better than the GBA since there you just have to walk with Pooh across the level and talk to all his friends. This time there are mini games here, and this place feels like a breath of fresh air, like you've been drowning in the random rooms of fights all this time, and this is the saving grace moment as you jump out of the water. First game is Veggie Panic, and here Sora must toss pumpkins and cabbages in the correct direction with the Keyblade. You send pumpkins to the right and cabbages to the left using the right and left symbol buttons. This one can be a little slow and you gotta get the timing right on when you can take the swing, but it's more interactive than anything from the last game. Next minigame is Balloon Glider. This is like a remixed version of the minigame from the last game where you had to defend Pooh from the bees. Only this time you and Pooh are attached to 2 balloons as you hover around the tree collecting honey orbs. You hit anything on the way up and you lose a balloon, but you can find extra balloons as you make your way back up. This game is definitely the easiest of the bunch, but it's enjoyable enough. Then there's Tigger's Jumpathon, and this plays out like how the mini jumping game from the first game should have played out. This time the game works like your basic Simon Said game, where Tigger will bounce around 4 stumps, each one corresponding to the symbols on the PlayStation controller. Like I said, it's a standard memory match game, so this will be as fun as your tolerance for this type of game will allow. For me, I'm pretty good with short patterns, but anything after 5, my brain short circuits and I can't handle it. Next is Whirlwind Plunge, which has you and Pooh skydiving to collect honey orbs while dodging obstacles. If you hit anything, Pooh will fall away, and you can't collect any orbs. This is the best minigame of the bunch, as it's fast-paced, it's not too easy, and it's not incredibly taxing. And finally, the game saves the worst for last, Bumble Rumble, which has you battling bees while protecting Pooh. All you do here is battle the bees, and this is no different than you would battle any other enemy in the game. I hate this one because basically it's just a battle where you protect an NPC. The minigame should be fun and be a distraction from the combat, yet here I am again fighting. You know, the thing I've been trying to get away from for the past how many floors? And that's all the side content, or rather I should say all the fun side content. The other side quest that you can take part in would be completing the card collection for Sora. This means finding and obtaining all cards in the game. Now by the game's end you might have a collection and percentage of about 80%. And most of the cards are easily given out to you, such as the map cards, the friend cards, the magic attacks. The reason why most of the collection will not be complete is because you're missing the enemy cards. And the only way to find these cards is to fight Heartless over and over again and hope they drop their card. And this is, and say it with me now, totally and 100% random and out of your control. Hell, there isn't even a map card to create a room where these types of cards drop more frequently. I completed the collection on one playthrough on my PS3, and let me tell you something, it is not anything I will want to ever do again. If you weren't already tired of the battle system, you sure as hell will be trying to do this. Though honestly, there's no reward for completing the collection other than the trophy. If you play the original PS2 version, you're doing this for bragging rights alone. And now this is the only side quest you can engage in. It's quite lacking when we compare to the original game. However, I'm not going to give the game too much flack in this area. This might be a PS2 remake now on PS3 and PS4, but its core design and mechanics were built around a portable handheld system. So naturally, there isn't going to be a ton of things to do after the credits roll. Honestly, though, even with this slight offering of side content, I will say the choice to give us brand new minigames for the 100 Acre Wood was the right call. Leaving it as it was in the original, where nothing happened and you just walked a straight line, would have been outright terrible. Even though the new minigames are short and somewhat easy, they're still engaging, and at least they get you away from the repetition of the combat for one floor of the castle at least. The presentation is great, much like the last game, though with a few caveats streaming from the game's origins. First off, the original PS2 release supported solid in-game graphics on par with the first Kingdom Hearts game. However, its cutscenes were, I guess, not rendered in engine, so they always appeared fuzzy. Thankfully, though, the PS3 and PS4 version fixed the cutscenes right up to where they look sharp. You still get the same bright, colorful Disney locations, though the downside here is the aspects of the designs tend to repeat. As I mentioned, when you create a room in the Disney world, it takes on the aesthetics of that world, but the room's layout will always look the same, so things tend to look familiar by the time you reach floor 3. It's not terrible, but it's just an effect of the game being a random dungeon crawler. Character models are once again spot on for the Disney representation, and a bit muted for the Kingdom Hearts original crew, thanks in part to the new characters just donning black coats. Though thankfully it's their personalities that shine through and make them memorable. Voice acting is solid, with the occasionally poorly translated line or space in the dialogue, but once again, this isn't voice acting that you're cringing to have to listen to, no matter how cheesy the dialogue may get. The odd thing here is that Haley Joel Osment's voice might surprise you depending on when you played this. See, Osment's voice is dropped between Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts 2, and the recording for the original PS2 version of this was done years after 2. So, it's odd to hear Kingdom Hearts 2 Sora's voice coming out of character model Sora from Kingdom Hearts 1. Standout voice actors this time are Osment and David Gallagher, since they got a lot more to do and say here. Gallagher especially is having fun flexing his range as he gets to voice Riku and the Riku replica, which brings back his more dark take on Riku's tone from the first game. Out of the new voice talent, Quentin Flynn as Axel has to be the standout. His charismatic performance engages you in such a way that you immediately get interested in his character. Also, probably helps that Flynn had already voiced several prominent characters in gaming before this that I was familiar with, like Raiden from Metal Gear Solid 2 and the original Reno from, anything pre the Final Fantasy VII Remake projects. The other characters do well in their respective roles, but if I had to give the shout out, I'd say Flynn nailed it. Also, it was great to hear the organization talk, since before this game the GBA version was text only, and I was always disappointed that a bunch of new characters wouldn't get to have voices. The soundtrack is a little odd to review since I've basically just reviewed it before in the last game. Did you like the music in Kingdom Hearts? Because if you did, it's pretty much the same here. Since the game has returning world and boss fights, most of the tracks from the first game return. However, just because the game's audio seems like a simple copy and paste job, that did not stop Yoko Shimura from giving a few new tracks her all. From the haunting reflected theme of each floor of Castle Oblivion to the bombastic organization boss fight music, Shimura makes sure you get to remember all the new tracks more than anything. Also, as a bonus, the remake of the game allowed Shimura to compose new tracks for the minigames and the extra boss fight. And these tracks are slamming. Honestly, take what I said about the minigames and add a point for each for all the music, except the Bumble Rumble, because, not even Shimura's brilliance can help that one out. What I love about Shimura is that she can make the slowest, most beautiful pieces of soft music and then go completely bombastic with it and make it wild and bouncy. There's maybe like 10 or so tracks added to Chain of Memories, but they're some of the best tracks in the game you'll find. So overall, how do I feel about Chain of Memories? Well, it can be fun for a while, and it definitely becomes less of a chore when you know how to get around the shortcomings. I'd be quick to tell you that even with all the cons I mentioned, I still love this game a lot, but honestly, I'd be kinda lying. I always started off excited to play Chain of Memories, but about 6 floors in, and I start getting bored by the repetitive nature of that gameplay. Though I have to give this game a bit of a free pass here, since this isn't really the PS2 sequel, but a GBA game that's been retooled for consoles. The core design of the original was a random dungeon crawler that you could play on the go. Portable games, by design, are meant to be played in these quick little sessions, so you should be trying to get through just a few rooms on one floor during one playthrough while you're on the go, rather than just gunning it through multiple floors while I'm sitting on a bed or on a couch playing. So I like Chain of Memories overall, but it's definitely not one of my top Kingdom Hearts games, and it definitely is one of the games I played second to least out of the entire series. It has its moments, but the randomness and the repetitive make it more of a chore to play through than the first game. And I know there's two different games, and I said comparing them wasn't fair, but when you play this version right after the first, especially in the newly released HD collections, I feel like players might get a little taken aback by these changes. The story though, the characters, presentation, music, they're superb. The game's randomness is its biggest detractor. I give them points for creativity for creating such a system, and it definitely stands out from the first game, but trust me, this game is probably the reason why all the follow-up games and spin-off games ended up using a battle system similar to the design of the first one. So overall, I like it, but I'm not running back to it anytime soon. I play it because it's the next game in the lineup, and chronologically I like to go through it, but if I don't finish it in the one sitting between Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2, I'm not losing sleep over it. So come back next time when we get to actually look at the follow-up game, the actual first sequel, Kingdom Hearts 2. Thanks for watching.